Hello, my name's Kerry Watson, and this is the story of the Footprints family. Back in 2007, I embarked on a trip to Kenya as a volunteer. Kind of a gap year for grown-up moment, really. It was at the time of my life where I felt in a place where I needed a bit of space away from things that were going on at the time, particularly my personal background of being adopted. And so decided to embark on this volunteer programme. Didn't want to go and lie on the beach for 2 weeks with my own space. I wanted to go and do something with community, particularly children. So it was a gap year for grown-up brochure, kind of guesswork, called them up, said I want to work with children and community. So they suggested this programme in the bush in Kenya. I didn't go with any expectations, certainly not of what, where we're at today. However, actually being on the ground and seeing what I saw and witnessed certainly inspired me to start thinking in a different way of how people survive. So I did the 3 weeks and I came back. It was November 2007. And in the January 2008, I decided to go back again to really get a better feel for it. So I didn't go on the volunteer programme. I met a family while I was out there and I kind of said, can I come back, but can I come and live with you? And it was a very humbling experience. So I was there for 3 months. So I stayed for 3 months. And during that time, I then kind of had this vision. I wonder if I could do something to support some of the vulnerable children. You're not going to change the world with every family, but maybe some of the... And I think that resonated with my personal situation. So as much as I'd gone through all this, I was adopted, I wasn't wanted. And, I was adopted into a family as much as it wasn't that successful, but the opportunity was there, and I went to school and I did my dancing lessons, and I was brought up in an environment that was safe, and I got regular food, and all of that. So as much as psychologically it wasn't the best, I did get my basic needs met. So thinking that if there's children in similar situations, not only they're going through the loss of parents or they're also how they're surviving, who's going to feed them, how they're going to go to school. So I was talking about, what I could do to help the children, and the family. I gave the idea that maybe I could build a home that could safeguard some of the kids. I went to the children's department. I kind of asked the question and said, as a white British woman, could I do this, and all those questions. And it was very, very vague, as it is still. And it basically, well, if that's what you want to try and do, nobody's going to stop you to try and do it. So I think to have that vision but to go back with nothing to the UK, I felt like I needed something tangible. So I literally drew some money out of the ATM down in the main town, and the local family had offered to sell me. It was just 1/4 of an acre at the time, 1/2 an acre actually, just for the sole purpose of what I wanted to do. So it was 50,000 shillings, which was about 400 quid at the time. For a piece of land, complete virgin land, nothing on it, no water, no electricity, just trees. And I had to pay for the trees extra. There was a couple of trees on it. I always remember that, walking around thinking. So Mr. and Mrs. Matassa, who owned the land, so we must have walked around 5 times, if not 10 times, and looking at every blade of grass. But anyway, it was a big thing for them. That was a big decision that they made as a family. As we started to grow the charity, I went back again. I think I went back middle of that year. I think I was working for TUI. I just happened to be in the right places at the right time. So they Thompson, I think it was then, not TUI. They gave me extra luggage allowance and obviously concessionary flights. And I went back and, I'd been collecting things, sheets and just, really small time stuff. Anyway, I went back and that's when I met Patrick. So Patrick's my husband now. We've been married 8 years, I think. And however, he's always been there. And again, I think that's, going back to people and trusting people over there. I do trust people, but because I was in a country that I didn't really understand, I didn't realise that maybe people have got different motives for different things. So, but I have been lucky. And Patrick was the one that, imagine, if I had raised a bit of money, I would go to my Western Union office and transfer it over to him for him to buy bricks and, cement. But in between all that, when I went and think the next time, I started to draw basic accommodation. And I still got the bit of paper, a bit of pink paper, well, we need a bit of a kitchen area. We'll need a dormitory. It's got to have big boys and girls. Really basic stuff. I mean, over the years, we've now had drawings done and it's been properly logged. But the first building, sincerely, was just mud and sticks. We used our own mud because it's very clayey, the mud is, and sandy, different places. A few casuarina trees and the local people. All manual. There's nothing, only the borehole, that's had machinery on that land. Everything has been built by hand. Everything. We just worked with people, and people soon got to understand what Footprints was about and why it was there. And we called it Footprints because, I called it Footprints because I was continuously walking, if you like, around the communities. And obviously I got flip-flops on or whatever, but the majority of kids particularly don't have any footwear. So all you see in the sand is footprints. So it was one of them moments where it's like, oh, crikey, if I ever get to this point, I'm going to call it Footprint. And I did, and that's where it's come from. Every child that we've had has come from a different vulnerable situation, that there has been no other answer. So even if the children are orphaned, maybe they've been then put with a family that clearly can't support their own family, let alone have the burden of another child. So, but every child has come from a different scenario. And I've been on the ground at every one of them to make sure I feel this charity is supporting the children that really need it the most, because I'm the voice, I suppose, of the UK and the people that are putting money, into the charity. I need to know it's real. I think it was went to the children's department. So in 2010, we rescued our first 5 children. So these children were identified in the community, and that made it real. We've got, over the years, we've had about 3 or 4 HIV children, which actually, in the context of the numbers of that, there's still a lot of HIV in the country. We haven't had to deal with too much of that situation. One of the children was a HIV child, and wasn't medicated. What we've done from the beginning is, as soon as the children have come into our care, we have taken them for health care checkups, which always includes a HIV test and just basic kind of blood test to make sure there's no underlying in condition. So that's how that's been identified. So they haven't known that they're HIV infected or the status. However, all it takes is regular medication and a reasonable diet, basic diet. And, you would never know the difference of these children that have, been medicated over the years. They go to counselling, they've had counselling to understand. The problem is we've always talked about it as a blood disorder and played it quite down, but it's still very stigmatised. So now they're older and they're in the community, they're still getting that, although probably people don't know, but as they talk about it amongst their friends, I presume, that, they're still feeling a bit vulnerable. But they're alive, and we've overcome that. So then we had Jane, Mary, Elizabeth and George. So they were a pretty regular family, actually. They got mum and dad, as much as they're living in the kind of the rural bush areas and in muddy houses, but they were together as a unit. And then George, their mother gave birth to George. The mother became quite sick, so Jane was the older sister, so she was kind of taking care of her mum, taking care of George. I mean, obviously there's no powdered milk, regular milk, it's breast milk or nothing, so she wasn't able to do that. So George was getting really malnourished. Then Mum was admitted into one of the hospitals, the government hospital, and she passed away. And Dad went to go and collect the body because they bury on their own lands. There's no kind of, there's certainly no crematoriums or anything like that. Culturally they bury. So Dad went to, collected the money and went to try and fetch the body back to bury, and he fell down an open latrine pit. And he was killed. So literally Mum and Dad died within 3 days of each other. So we were asked if we could support the children. The community were in a bit of a, goodness knows what we're going to do with these kids. So I said to Patrick, let's go to the burial. I want to see if this is real. And sure enough, it was. There was just basic coffins. They were just trying to bury these two, mum and dad. Children were there, kind of traumatised, really, especially the girls. George was obviously a baby. And they brought George out. He was kind of wrapped in this paper, really. It was not nice. And I looked at him, and he was so malnourished. He was a typical, a child that I've seen on Comic Relief, or, I'm like, oh my God, this is actually happening. And I'm seeing this is happening. So I had got a volunteer out there then. Sally Holland was with me, and she looked at me and she said, Kerry, what are you going to do? And I'm like, this was a real moment of like, I can make a decision on people's lives. And I think that's resonated right the way through. That you're looking around for someone to give you an answer, and actually, no, you want to do this, Kerry, so you need to make this decision. So I said to Sally, I said to the family in the community that were left, I said, okay, George needs taken care of now. He wasn't George at the time, he was Matisia, but I called him George. I don't know why he ended up being George, but and we went back for him the next day. So it was that case of, we need to go and find baby milk, we need to go and find, which is very rare. But, over the years, the UK have been amazing with trying to, collect things if we've got an emergency with the children, a child, particularly with baby milk. 14 years on, Jane is working in the kitchen and procurement, Mary's working in the school office. Elizabeth is in medical school in Quorley, and George is in first year of high school, taller than me. So, and they all feel part and belonging to something. We have 2 children that we rescued from a rubbish tip. The rubbish in Kenya, we don't have the 3 different colour bins or anything like that we have over here. A few years ago, it was just strewn all over the place. But they didn't generate rubbish like we did, because they haven't got the tins and the processed stuff and things. So it wasn't that bad, but whatever they got, it was just, in the gutters or in the, the drainage bits, whatever they tried to create. And all of a sudden, there appeared these skips, like a proper skip, metal skip, that the council were putting in different areas of the towns. Not where we are. We still have to burn our rubbish, because it's the only option we've got, unless we take it down to the main town. But it was like, I was like, wow, that's great, that's progress, Until somebody called us regarding Matthias and Lupina, who were living apparently on rubbish, on a rubbish dump. So we went along to see the situation, and I've said before, I always try to look brave, like I can cope with any of the situations. And, before we travelled to where this area was, and before we even reached it, was quite in the bush. And before we even reached it, is the smell and the birds hovering. You could just smell it. So basically what was happening was, yes, they'd put in this kind of structure in the townships of these skips, but all they were doing then was taking them and landfilling in a just part of the bush. But it wasn't contained. It wasn't fenced off. It wasn't got a gate on it. It was just open to everybody. So you can imagine how, if you're starving, you haven't got a home or a roof, you'd do anything to create that. And that's exactly what was happening. So it wasn't just these 2 children and this particular one family. It was a host of people living in this tip that was just strewn everywhere. And it was like they were started to recycle it themselves. So the mother of the 2 children was, and the kind of guy that was there, I don't know who he was particular, but he was living there on this particular area, were kind of alcoholics from the dregs of the bottles that were being dumped there from probably hotels or whatever, but just dumped. So, and then food that was obviously being found there, drying out. There was dry meat, just all drying out on top of the plastic, these little, the housey thing that the kids were in, it was only this high, so you had to bend right down, and everybody was sleeping in the same thing. So the kids were seeing all sorts, if you can imagine, what parents or, mother was doing with the guy after she, it was horrific. And the smell and everything about it. This isn't human. This can't be happening. But nobody was doing anything about securing the area. And it was food. It was survival again, another experience of survival. So we took we had the children's department again. They came with us actually, and because they got a mother, and they said this wasn't, the right environment, but it's still there. I mean, this is like 6 years ago, and the tip's still there, and I'm sure there's people still living in it. But we were just able to take those 2 children out, and then now Matthias he actually managed to get into Kenyatta High, which is a national school. So the potential that these children have, and identifying the skills that they've got, even the adults, there's so much missed from the Kenya community that could be a real asset to their own country, but nobody's investing in the areas that they need to. We're all capable of making change and differences to people's life, whatever scale, and to step out of your comfort zone a little bit and think about what you can do. Now, that might be, if it's footprints, that might be actually coming over and, walking with me and doing what I'm doing, or or doing something over this side of the water, the fundraising and that kind of thing. But equally remembering, I think that what the message is that we're all human beings here. We're all human beings on one earth that's living totally different lives. And why should people be so different? And we can't make a difference to everybody's lives, but we can. It's proven that as a normal human being, I'm just a mummy, really, and that, with determination and people's support, because it wouldn't have happened without everybody that's kind of believed in what I'm doing, that we have been able to make these changes. I had a vision and a mission that, this is how I was going to do it, and I'd love to see, the changes that are being made. And that has been happening, but the biggest impact is, the proudest moment is having the impact now, where the dream was for these children to be given education, good healthcare, where we've not lost a child, and they're in a position where they're now working towards an independent life with the skill sets. That's just not education. That's all about what we've tried to instill them about, being good people and trying to be honest, and I hope that's the future for what the next generation will hold. I hope Footprints will ever be forgotten for what it's done for children and youth and community.